Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm delighted to be joined by JP Mason. And before we get into any of the topics today, JP, I'm going to ask you about your attire. That is the first Celtic tracksuit I ever owned back in 1987 for the centenary year. Talk us through this. It's a gem.
Well, it's not the original. Let's be brutally honest from the get-go. It's not the original. It's a very, very high quality repress of said 1988 tracksuit, centenary tracksuit top. I didn't have one as a kid, but I used to borrow my friends to wear. Like, I used to get loan of folks' clothes when you were a wee guy. Like,
Aye.
I used to wear my mate Greenie's one of this, and I've actually got a picture of me wearing that top. In fact, I'll probably show you. This was not planned.
As if by magic.
You what?
As if by magic.
Do you remember the kids' play area, Little Marco's in Edinburgh? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't. No, I don't.
It was
passed me by.
This is going to be a blast from the past for a lot of people if you're Central Belt based, but that was the place to go for a kids' party in the sort of mid to late 80s.
And did they burn you a vinyl?
Yeah, if it was your birthday, you got a single to take home with you, which was the Little Marco's theme song. I'm definitely not going to play that just now, but you can see on the back, there's my name, John Paul from Little Marco. And then you can see pictures of like the play area. It's like, ball pit and slides and all that sort of stuff. It was total class. Anyway, here is a picture of me in the centenary top as a wee guy.
Go, I see it, man.
With Little Marco. So there you go.
So was Little Marco a teddy bear?
It was a giant, a strange looking giant bear. Kind of like the thing that you see in The Shining. In that scene in The Shining when there's like a flash into the room.
That's a creepy wee scene, that.
Yeah, like a football mascot anyway. So that was the year dot for me, and I had to get this repress when I saw it, and there you go.
What do you reckon of all the kind of remakes in that, JP? Because, on the one hand, there was this period where if you were able to come across like an adult size jersey for 1980, people were buying them for like 300 quid. It was incredible. And that was just a replica, not a match-worn jersey. So these companies have cottoned onto that, and they're starting to remake all the classics. And you see them in the crowds now. I mean, through the Scotland games at the Euros, you've seen all the old classic Scotland jerseys. And part of me is like, well, fair dues, because, I mean, Umbro are never going to redo them if they're no longer involved with Celtic or Scotland or whoever it is. But obviously people are saying, well, they're bootlegging. But there's a want for it. There actually is a need for it.
No, totally. I'm on board with it. I wouldn't get a strip, a repress strip. I just, for some reason, I don't know if it's just my, it's just my kind of the way I go about it. Like I've got my old strips. I keep my old strips. I wouldn't go about and buy like a replica strip like this, but because it was a tracky top, I was like, you're never going to get a tracky top. Like, you're never going to be able to get one of these on eBay. I did see one once, and it was going for, like you said, I think it was going for north of 300 quid. And I was like, I like it, but I don't like it that much. So I didn't engage with that. But before we get into the Celtic chat, that is, I'm going to hold my hands up. It's an Aberdeen strip. Yes, I know this is a Celtic State of Mind. However, this is an Aberdeen strip that was made in collaboration with Bands FC and the Twilight Sad to raise money for charity, and over £11,000 was made for charity through the sale of these shirts with Bands FC, and they did a Frightened Rabbit one as well with Hearts, and they've all raised money for charity, and it's been amazing to see people posting the pictures of them getting the tops through the post, and then I got mine yesterday, rather delayed, but I've got it now. So I'm the owner of an Aberdeen strip for the first time.
For all the right reasons. For all the right reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, what Bands FC done was tremendous. It was one of the ideas you think, why has nobody thought of this before? With the collaborated music and football. So Mogwai's crest was a Celtic crest.
Yeah.
Obviously, Twilight Sad, Aberdeen, Frightened Rabbit, Hearts, etc. And they obviously moved into producing jerseys for charity. So superb. Massive charitable element to today's show, JP. We will be talking about St Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic, and what Acsom and others, we've got 15 podcasts signed up, are coming together this weekend to raise cash, some much needed cash, it's got to be said, and I'll delve into the story a wee bit deeper for St Mary's and St Alphonsus. And I've got to say, last year was a huge success, loads of money raised for really needy causes. But I think moving forward, having found out what I have in the last couple of weeks, I think we'll always do it for St Mary's, because they do need our support. And I think that as Celtic supporters, when you look at the origins of the club, that place needs our support big time. So Acsom will certainly be doing it. And a whole host of other podcasts will be getting involved, and I'll name them at some stage. We'll be talking about tonight's game. It always seems to be you and I on the pre-match. We'll be talking about tonight's game, a couple of returning players. There's chat about another couple of players that we might be bringing in. Loads to discuss. So we'll start off with St Mary's. Now, there is a link underneath this video, wherever you're watching it, on Facebook or LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch or Twitter. And it's a GoFundMe link. And what we're trying to do this year is raise £10,000. I know it's a lot of money, but that £10,000 would be a game-changing amount for St Mary's. Now, as well as just the general upkeep, which sometimes you don't think about, JP, you don't think about the chapel needing the upkeep and the price of the heating and what happens if there's a leaky roof, etc., etc. But the situation is the running costs against the amount of people who actually go to the chapel is not making enough money, basically. So there is that element. But there's also the element of the good work that they do in the community all year round, and taking people in who are, the most vulnerable within their communities, JP, supporting them, and trying to get them back into society. And that's what we're all about. So we can raise that money. I know we can raise 10,000 quid. We're going to kick it off with the charity weekend or this weekend. Now we're going to be doing various things through the week with auctions and all that kind of stuff, JP. So it's actually going to extend beyond the weekend. And we're looking to raise £10,000. So just while we're online, let's have a wee look at the GoFundMe page. And we're currently sitting on £1,465 before we start. And we're going to start at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. We're going to do 12 hours on the Saturday, 12 hours on the Sunday. During that time, hopefully, if the game goes ahead, we'll be covering the Dundee United game. We'll also have special guests coming into the studio. And as I say, we're going to be collaborating with some of the fantastic Celtic platforms that are out there. And they're all listed on our social media. Some were involved last year. Some are appearing for the first time. Some of the podcasts who were on last year are no longer with us. And some of the ones that will be appearing are brand new. So it's great for Celtic fans to get involved and for Celtic podcasts to get involved. And I think we can raise 10 grand. As I say, it's a game-changing amount for St Mary's. You think of St Mary's, JP, you think of the birthplace of the club in November 1887. You think about the recent funeral with Bertie Auld. You think about Tommy Burns. The 125th anniversary Mass. And every year we now have a celebration of Celtic's birth at St Mary's. You just need to look out the front of the building and on Gorton Moor, the long-awaited Lassen Memorial, the tribute to the Great Hunger is out there now. And for me, it's the heartbeat of the club. We can never forget that.
No, and you mentioned St Mary's so many times that was my parish in Bathgate, St Mary's Chapel in Bathgate, and I went to St Mary's Primary School in Bathgate as well. So that it all ties in. I've never actually been to St Mary's in Glasgow. I mean, it's not my local jurisdiction, and obviously I'm not from Glasgow, so I never went there when I was a kid or anything like that. But I think what an amazing choice of charity to raise money for, because ultimately, like you said, you don't think about these things, about the upkeep and turning the heating on and not having the heating on and things like that. That can make a huge difference. And if they are in need of the money to help, as a place of respite for people to go to, then I'm delighted that we're doing that.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, I don't know if you'll see this, but that there is a mosaic as you walk into St Mary's, right? So that's on the floor, JP. And they imported the stone from the Holy Land for that mosaic. And obviously, as you can see, that inspired Acsom's logo, which is up on this jersey here. So that's the Acsom cross. That's where it came from. And that's the first thing you see when you walk in. And then obviously, in fact, before you walk in, there is beautiful stonework at the entrance with two angels with a cross in the middle. You go in, I think the last time I was in, they were housing the Brother Walford painting by Peter Howson. It's a beautiful place. And I know that the formation of Celtic was actually in the church hall, which has since been demolished, but it's an important part of Celtic's story. And I just think that, you know, it should probably have occurred to us before now, but now that we've made that agreement with St Mary's, I think we should probably be fundraising all year round as of next year, just to keep everything ticking along there, JP. And as I say, brilliant work in the community. You imagine the birth of Celtic and the reasons, and we all know the history, the reasons why Celtic were formed, and the poverty that existed within these areas, and you know, particularly within the Irish Catholic community within these areas. And you look at the situation now, there's still poverty, JP, still poverty in the same areas. And I just think it's astonishing. So if we can do anything to try and alleviate that, we certainly will give it our best shot. Now, I love the chat about Frightened Rabbit, the centenary season, St Mary's, but you were at a very special event on Monday night, JP. Now, probably if you were to get all the Acsom contributors together, you probably are involved in more events than everybody combined because of the job you do. But this was a social event on Monday, and I've seen loads of the footage. I wasn't there. It sounds as though I've missed an absolute cracking event. Tell us about the Hydro.
Yeah, it was that was tremendous, and I guess it was never going to be anything other than tremendous. But when you say to people who maybe aren't Celtic minded or football minded that you're going to an event at the Hydro with, you know, ex-players on stage sitting on couches with microphones, people were kind of like, what? How is that? How's that entertaining? Like, how, you know, when you think of the things that are normally at the Hydro, you know, like last night it was Gary Barlow, night before it was James, and the night
The
before
Mondays, the Mondays were supporting them.
Monday,
With Paul Gas wheeling, yep.
And then Monday night it was Henrik Larsson, John Hartson, and Chris Sutton on stage with no songs. There was no songs from any of them. They did have a chat playing some Celtic related songs on stage, and David, I think his name was, very good he was too. But yeah, it was just organised by Simon Donnelly and Jackie McNamara. Their company, First Star, organised this event, and I think they realised they were maybe shooting for the moon a little bit by, you know, booking such a big venue and going for it. But, you know, it's one of those, it's the old Field of Dreams line. If you build it, they will come. And then like over 10,000 people were there at Monday night to hear those guys speak and hear Martin O'Neill join them on stage to, you know, talk about the years he was at the club. And you know, there was a supporting cast as well: Avchik, Mialby, Petrov. They're all there, and it was Alan Thompson as well. It was really special just to see them all together again after all this time. And there was footage shown in the screens reminiscing about Seville and other victories, other notable victories at that time. And yeah, it was great to be part of it, and then to get the opportunity to actually speak to Martin O'Neill afterwards and thank him for everything that he's done for, well, me individually as a Celtic fan, and collectively the Celtic support as a whole was a moment I'll never forget. And he was so sound as well. He was just, it was genuinely, you know, pleased and happy to hear, you know, someone telling him, you know, I grew up in the 90s, and then you came along and just lifted our club up off our feet and off our knees, should I say, and made us, you know, kind of walk about with a smile on our face again, which we didn't really get to do a lot in my teenage years. So yeah, that was amazing, and grateful to have been a part of it.
Superb. And Martin O'Neill and Henrik Larsson were both looking sharp, I've got to say. On the Friday, I had been at the John Hartson fundraiser which is a lunch in Glasgow. And on stage with John was Stan Petrov, Tomo, and somebody else, I think, whose name escapes me. Was it his son? No, I thought he wasn't there. Although he had one of the best lines of the night on Monday, I believe. But it was great to hear the guys talking about Martin O'Neill and the impact that he had on their careers as well. And it was all for a good cause on Friday with Big John. But that team that you were running through there, you run through O'Neill, legend, Larsson, legend, Sutty, Hartson, and we've got great things to say about all these players. And I sometimes, over the last few months, I've considered, JP, that it's a shame that Neil Lennon wasn't there. And it's a shame that there's a lot of kind of toxicity around what happened last season. And I think that, when I'm looking at where we are just now, and somebody's came up there talking about chasing rabbits because of Angie's recent comments. I was looking at this season. And at this moment in time, I've played 14 league games and we are on 29 points. At this stage last season, after 14 league games, we were on 31 points. So we're a couple of points better off last season. Last season at this stage, we were 13 points behind. We had those 2 games in hand, you'll remember, after the Bolingoli incident. This time round, we're 7 behind with a game in hand. So we're closer to the league leaders. But we've got fewer points. There seems to be a much better mood in the camp at this moment and amongst Celtic supporters. If we take away the Brendan Higgins and what happened with the food banks last week out of the equation at the moment. However, on the park, overall, we're a wee bit worse off. So I was looking at that and I was thinking about the stories that you and I were talking about yesterday about the hydro. And I've got to say that in time, there has to be reparation when it comes to Neil Lennon's standing within Celtic Football Club, what he done with us as a player, what he done with us as a manager. And last season was a collective failure, JP. It was a collective failure that was, for me, made even worse by external factors as well. We were murdered last season. I'm not trying to say anything different, but it was a collective failure, wasn't it? And I think that during the season, as the season went on, me and others were very critical of Neil Lennon, but it can't be forever. There has to be a period where it's like, you know what, this guy is a club legend. And when we're talking about Moravcik, O'Neill, Jackie, Larsson, Sutton, Hartson, Neil Lennon's in there. He's part of that.
Oh, no, 100%. I mean, he appeared on the screen and when he was mentioned, there was applause in the crowd when he was mentioned. Not rapturous, but, applause enough to pick up on it. And then there was you saw him on the screen on his back at the end of Seville, like absolutely gutted at the final whistle. And I think I read an article, I forget what it was. I read an article which kind of said, maybe Monday night would have been a night where he could have been there and sort of in and around those people that he was successful with as a player. And obviously he was with Mjällby as an assistant coach as well. So, I think maybe there was an opportunity there. Whether he was invited, I don't know. I didn't ask the question. Whether he was invited and he said no, or wasn't invited at all, I don't know. But I think like you said, there has to be some sort of bridge built at some point, because it just leaves a sour taste in the mouth that he's kind of persona non grata in some people's eyes when you think of what he did as a player. I mean, forget about anything he did as a manager, good or bad. What he did as a player, first and foremost, I mean, he was man of the match for me a lot of the time in his playing days, in the same way that Kieran Tierney was man of the match a lot of the time. Where it was a kind of, the running joke was, oh, who's getting the Kieran Tierney man of the match award this week? Because we were like, oh, we can't just give it to Tierney every week, so they would give it to somebody else, even although you knew Tierney was the stick-on man of the match. That was a lot of the time, and certainly in my opinion was the same with Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon ran himself into the ground for Celtic and was so influential in a lot of our key victories that won us titles and got us to a European final. So
I also think that the very fact that we've seen the way that the club is run, JP, and by the way, Ange Postecoglou, I think, has done a remarkable job when you consider the way the club is run behind the scenes. And you look at the whole situation with Dom Mackay coming in, 72 days later, he's gone. You ask yourself, does the club really have the ambition? Do they share the same ambitions as the support? I mean, just a couple of days ago, Queen's Park made an announcement. It was an audacious appointment, where they've actually plucked a highly rated football brain from AZ Alkmaar. And you think to yourself, in the same week that, and I'm not comparing the two clubs, but the situations in the same week, Man United go out and get Ralph Rangnick. And 8 months ago, we dedicated a show to why Celtic should go out and get Ralph Rangnick. And Man United, who are arguably the biggest club in the world, have just gone out and done it. And I just don't know if Celtic as a club share the same ambitions, even as, what they're doing down at Queen's Park showed Celtic up this week, if you ask me. They've went out there and they've made a huge appointment. We've not done that in terms of a director of football to assist Ange Postecoglou, And I just think that these things that are happening at other clubs, the Rangnick one, here's one for you. So we did that show 8 months ago. I'm not going to say, I heard of Ralph Rangnick before X, Y, and Z, because I hadn't heard of him until people started commenting on the Acsom bulletin about Ralph Rangnick. And what I find, and I don't know about other supporters because I spend the majority of my time with Celtic fans. I just think that on the whole, from my experience, they're very well informed, be that about football, culture, music, literature, history. I just feel that personally, JP, that Celtic fans are very, very well informed. Now, that might be the same across the board in Scotland. I don't know. I don't spend much time with Aberdeen fans or Dundee fans or Dunfermline to comment, but I know that Celtic fans are very well informed. So when we were talking about this figure who could really tear up the whole football operations at Celtic and be that bridge between the football department and the board, the comments started coming through on these broadcasts saying Ralph Rangnick. And I'd never heard of the guy. So then you go and, as you do your research, you find out the changes that he's made at various clubs. And 8 months later, Manchester United are appointing him. But what I can say is the club were pitched that idea 12 months ago. Ralph Rangnick. They were pitched that idea 12 months ago from someone who knows a lot more about football than me.
But then the level of money that you're talking about being involved in that, I mean, it would be nothing. A drop in the ocean for Man United to, one, get him out of his contract at Lokomotiv Moscow. Whatever that cost, I'm sure it wasn't a 4 or a 5 figure sum. So they'll have just gone and paid that, got him, and then given him the money that he wants, given him the remit that he wants. Although I have seen a bit of sort of bite back. I think Declan shared a post about how the fact that Man United were keeping all the kind of the old guard, and it just sounded so familiar to us in our situation, whereby we were retaining, John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan, Stephen McManus, and these guys are all kind of kept in the job because they're Celtic guys or whatever, and Man United are doing the same with Fletcher, Carrick, that kind of thing, and whether or not Rangnick's bothered about that in this short-term window that he's got to work with the team, because he's the coach, isn't he? He's the head coach for the next 6 months, and then it changes to a consultancy role or something like that, where he oversees the development of the football side of things, which is what Gary Neville has been screaming out for to happen at Man United. For every time I've heard him talk, he's said that the club's broken and it needs fixed, and that's what he said. So we at Celtic, or not we, but the board has just decided to sort of put off doing any tinkering with the football side of things, because they're getting away with it just now, because Ange Postecoglou has become the darling of the support and is working the media really well, and is getting performances and results as well. So it's almost like we can just sort of turn the lights out and sit in the room like that while everything happens outside, and then hopefully they'll just be like, oh, when we open the door, everything will be all right. And I hope so too, because that's all we can really hope for at the moment, because there's no alternative than what we have in front of us.
There is a comment coming through here. I'm just going to try and pull it up. And it says that Ange, there we go. Michael McDonald. Hi, Michael. Glad that you're joining us on YouTube. Ange doesn't want a director of football. You know what? The club need one. Because Ange Postecoglou, let's look at the average term of a Celtic manager. What is it now? You look at Ronnie Deila, Brendan Rodgers, Neil Lennon times 2. What is it, 3 years? So the club need it. So in 3 years' time, whenever Ange has written his name into the Celtic history books, and we don't know what that's going to entail in the next few seasons, he leaves and we're still going to need it. And I think it's all about structure within the club, JP. Now, I get that argument about the old guard, you know, and it's been brought up this week. I've been watching a few of the Man U shows on YouTube. The Stretford Paddock's the one I tend to watch, but they're talking about that, the old guard, and people say jobs for the boys and an old pals act. But I think there's a flip side to that, especially with a club like Celtic. And when I was talking, well, you take Bertie Auld, for example, right? So Bertie Auld, the late great, was signed by Jimmy McGrory, who was signed by Willie Maley, who played in the first game Celtic ever played in 1888. So there's a bloodline to the history and the traditions and the expectations of this football club. And I think that to a lesser degree, there's some of the names I've just mentioned. John Kennedy, you look at who signed John Kennedy, right? There's a great picture of Willie McStay, you know, because he and Eric Black were involved in the youth academy at the time. John Kennedy and Steve McManus are signing on the same day. Who signed Willie McStay? Sean Fallon. Who signed Sean Fallon? Jimmy McGrory. Who signed Jimmy McGrory? Willie Maley. Takes you right back to the roots of the club. And I think there is an importance in that. Now, by the way, if the guy, i.e. John Kennedy, is no good at the job, it shouldn't be in a job. Like, no. That's a given. But there is an important factor in relation to keeping the traditions of this club alive, I feel. As long as it can do it, as long as it can do the job.
Look, I've got no issue with people being kept on, providing that they can do a job. You know, I'm not for sentimentality, and also, you know, I've always said, and we said this, you know, we banged the drum on this so much last season about, you know, whoever comes in has to be given free rein, has to be in charge of his department, and, you know, not be have staff foisted upon him. And from what we've been led to believe so far, that's the case with Ange Postecoglou. He you know, was given these guys, but the caveat to that was that he was okay with it and was said, well, this is what I do when I go to clubs. I don't necessarily have this, you know, big bus full of people that I bring in and implement structures or whatever. So he works with clubs on who they bring in. Once he's there, I guess, and uses the people that are there. So, you know, that's what I was thinking about the Ralph Rangnick thing at Man United. Like, is it the same case with him, that he, you know, goes in and sort of surveys what's happening at a club, and then from the 6 month period after, he then will then start to hire and potentially fire people, because I mean he'll decide whether or not he thinks the coaches that are there are good enough. And whether or not he thinks that they're going to affect Manchester United's future in a positive way. And I guess Ange Postecoglou did the exact same thing when he came in and looked at Kennedy and Strachan and thought, okay, I can work with these guys. They're pretty on the ball. They've got a good relationship with the players. As we have been told many times, lots of players have name-checked John Kennedy as being somebody that's been important.
Who's the recent one? I was reading an interview. Was it Chris Ayer?
Chris Ayer was one, yeah. And again, I don't think people would just, as I said before, I don't think people would just say that for the sake of it. It's not like, it wasn't like a tokenistic, oh, I'll get John Kennedy some good favour with the Celtic support and say something nice about him. People don't do that. I mean, he would have said it and it would have been genuine. So
the other players came to my mind. It was Rab Douglas who was there on Friday.
Oh yeah,
he wasn't up on the stage, but Big Rab was there, looking as big and tanned as he always does. What a size of hands he's got on him as well. Feed the Bear comes in on a almost daily basis, having a few problems. Great that you joined us though on YouTube. The reason I bring this up is because you were talking about Bears earlier on, and whenever you talk about Bears, I just think of Roy Aitken, and there he is. And we've got a few points coming through on the Neil Lennon thing that we were speaking about. And I think Terence Pat, another long-time contributor, says Lennon's legacy isn't ruined. He's done great things with the club. Time will heal the wounds, which are still raw. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make, JP. Last season was, it was a perfect storm in many ways. And loads of people could have done things differently. But I just think that if you put it all, in the melting pot, it was always going to end in failure.
Yeah.
And of course, Neil Lennon was part of that. But I just think that as football fans, we tend to focus on the gaffer, don't we? A lot of the time when things aren't going well.
As we are right now. We're focusing on Ange Postecoglou because things have gone right. But I don't think every single thing has gone right because of Ange Postecoglou. There's other things that have gone right in his favour, i.e., we've managed to get players in that are more suited to the system. There's a difference in appetite with the players that are there. So the switch around of personnel has benefited Ange Postecoglou. Whether or not Ange Postecoglou would have been able to get a tune out of that team last season that's a completely different question and probably show, because if Neil Lennon had been relieved of his duties, say in August last year, and we'd brought in Ange Postecoglou, he was still walking into a dressing room with unhappy players, and would they have been inspired by him? Who knows? It's a different question, but I have to laugh as well at Kev Graham calling Ralph Rangnick friend of the podcast yesterday because he replied to an email. It was like, oh, he's there a friend of the podcast. That was pretty good pattern from Kev.
Well, nothing ever no bold. If you don't ask, you don't get, So 8 months ago on the back of that, part of the process of a name popping up is to try and find out as much as you can. So I emailed him. I asked him for an interview. I watched a brilliant interview that he did on Coaches Voices, which is a brilliant YouTube channel. And he was brilliant. I thought he'd be great. I mean, let's talk about structure. Let's talk about, restructuring a football department of a big football club. That's all relevant. He was kind of busy though, but he did get back to us, which was lovely of him. We're talking about
subscriber.
What's that, mate?
Who subscribed, is he?
You never know. You never know. Interestingly enough, we were down talking about you don't ask, you don't get. We asked for Gaz wheeling out Happy Mondays to do an acoustic session with us, and we travelled into Manchester a few weeks ago to record it, and it's on the YouTube channel. Happy Mondays are one of my all-time favourite bands. I love them. I listen to the Mondays to this day on a daily basis, so to go down there and meet them and get a session and an interview was just tremendous. But whilst we were in Manchester to kill two birds with one stone, we went up to see the Stretford Paddock guys, who have got an office in the middle of Manchester, and they welcomed us in, and at that point they knew nothing about Ralph Rangnick. They did not know about Ralph Rangnick. They are trying to catch up with that. So I think the Celtic supporters, I'm not going to say Acsom, because as I say, I only heard about him through the comments, were ahead of the curve when it came to the name Rangnick. And I'll be watching how Man U do with interest, due to the fact that obviously we had recommended them to Celtic. Tob Rogic and Near Beaton are back for tonight's game. And I think that we need to ask the question, after I thought a fairly comprehensive victory. I thought the 2-1 scoreline probably flattered Aberdeen a wee bit. I'm going to ask the question, do we make any changes tonight?
I mean, there's a lot of talk about McCarthy after Sunday's game.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I saw quite a few posts on Twitter, people saying controversial opinion, but I thought James McCarthy had a really good game today, and they were getting quite a lot of response to that. Conversely, there was quite a few people that were like, yeah, didn't think McCarthy was up to much. So he still is dividing opinion, but I think it would be quite harsh to drop McCarthy after he played in a winning midfield, in a pretty must-win. Well, they're all must-win games, but even more so off the back of the fact that Rangers had picked up the points at Livingston the day before, or was it earlier in the day? I can't remember. But no, I think we that was a big game, important game. James McCarthy played in it and was on the winning side. So I always find it a bit harsh if he was to just be kicked out and sort of near Beaton brought back in. I think at this moment in time, based on that performance, it's his jersey to lose. Rogic is a different kettle of fish. I mean, Rogic is probably, if he's fit, he's probably the guy that you really, really need back in that midfield to unlock the defences that have been bothering us so much. Like he just has that knack of seeing runs, seeing passes, and I know the guys were talking yesterday about how best to utilise Kyogo Furuhashi, and I think Rogic is the guy that 100% can do that, because he's got an amazing football brain. He's got the range of passing. He'll spot the runs that Furuhashi's making that other people aren't spotting. And, you cannot question it. Whether Furuhashi scored or not scored in the league since the Dundee game or not, you cannot question the guy's enthusiasm, his effort, his work rate. I mean, he got absolutely battered against Aberdeen on Sunday. I mean, again, people are like, oh, he goes down too easy, and this, that, and the next thing. It's like he was getting roughhoused by Aberdeen. There's no two ways about it. I was surprised to see him last as long as he did. Obviously he's not a commanding figure, so he is susceptible to getting ragdolled a bit. But the treatment that he got was kind of like, oh well, welcome to Scottish football. It was one of those games, So I think Rogic, if he's fit and ready to go back in, he would start. But then, does he start? I mean, how long has Rogic been out for? It feels like.
Well, yeah, it was a Hibs game, wasn't it? So, several weeks. And I think when you talk about McCarthy and Turnbull, and then you're looking at Beaton and Rogic coming in, I think there's a lot to be said that McCarthy probably needs the games more now, JP, whereas Turnbull could be doing with the rest, because he's played pretty much all season. And when he came into the side last October, he played pretty much for the rest of last season, and he did so well that he got the Young Player of the Year. But he's not really had that break, and you've got to, on the one hand, think, well, you've got to be strong enough to be a professional footballer at that level. But he has had a near career-ending injury, and yet it took him a wee while to get back into the Celtic side. But he's played constantly, really, for the last year and a bit. So I would also be taking that into consideration and saying, well, James McCarthy needs the games. He didn't do anything on Sunday that would deserving of him getting dropped. Turnbull probably needs a rest, and therefore I would agree with you. I'd bring back Rogic, but I would actually drop Turnbull for Rogic, and I would leave Beaton on the bench. And I think that McCarthy has earned another start tonight. I mean, you look at McCarthy now, 31 years of age, and I think that I was asking this at the weekend as well. He's an Irish international, and I can never remember him retiring. So he's maybe got aspirations to get back into the Irish setup as well, JP. And I think that that was just his 12th appearance in a Celtic jersey on Sunday. 12 appearances, 4 starts. He needs the games more than anything. And I think that he made a big enough impact. Even if you take in isolation his involvement in the second goal, that was pivotal. But throughout the game, I think he managed the game pretty well. And Ange keeps getting asked about changing once you're ahead, like, when we're looking at the Leverkusen away. Change it, manage the game, defend, don't make these substitutions. These are some of the criticisms that Ange Postecoglou got. But he continually says, no, this is the process. But in saying that, I felt that McCarthy did manage that game. He slowed things down massively. There was no real urgency in the last 15 minutes to try and find pockets of space. He just slowed it down. So, I would go for McCarthy as a starter tonight.
I think the thing about McCarthy, and maybe this is just my point of view on McCarthy, is that I have never been that sure of what type of player James McCarthy is, what type of midfielder he is. Like, is he an 8, a 10, a 6? I don't really know. And I think maybe, obviously, everyone's going to have question marks over him because of his fitness record and his lack of game time, and the fact that we've given him a 4-year deal at 30 years old. There's a lot of red flags there, really, to be like, why have we signed this guy? And also, he's not come up here with like 40, 50 games every season under his belt for a club down south. He's come up here with this really patchwork playing history. And again, because of that, you've not really got a true reflection of his identity as a midfielder. That's just my opinion. I don't know if other people share that, and that's why it's led to other people questioning why he's here and what we're doing playing him and all that. So I really want to see the guy doing well, because it seems like you always like to see players come up here who have had a hard time doing well. There's so many. I mean, Chris Sutton was talking about it on Monday night about how he'd had such a rough time at Chelsea, and he cost them 10 million, and he was kind of like pains to say, well, that wasn't really my doing. It's not as if I put that price on my own head and said, oh, I'm 10 million, take it or leave it. So I mean, he had the rough time there, and then he comes up here and just has a complete new lease of life. Gets his confidence back and does the business for us domestically, but then also does the business scoring against Blackburn at Ewood Park, his old club.
Yeah.
So it's almost a similar thing, where James McCarthy's come up here, obviously a Celtic fan. You could put that to one side and just say he's a guy who's had a bit of a rough time in his career. Yes, he's made probably quite a lot of money, and I'm sure he'll not retire a poor guy. But footballers want to play games and win trophies, and it would be great for him, as a Celtic fan, when you add that back in, as a Celtic fan, to sort of get his hands on some sort of silverware, and he's got a first opportunity on the 19th of this month to do so.
Of course, that's another thing. He who has that jersey, and we'll talk about a few others like that, JP, will have one eye on that cup final.
It's hunger, isn't it? It's hunger. Yeah. As was spoken about by a defender in a blue shirt last week, it's about hunger, and we hopefully have more people in that team now that are hungry than people that aren't. So
that's the big thing that for me is quite visible. Now, I totally respect the data analysis side of football, and in actual fact, on this Sunday, the huddle breakdown with Alan Morrison, end of call, will be on the Acsom Charity Weekender, and I totally respect that. But I think that there are other things that you just can't, you can't. Yeah, you just can't. There's no way you can put a figure on how, for example, morale, a changing room, losing the dressing room, all that kind of stuff. You can't put that on a spreadsheet. And these are the things I think that observers of football, which I basically class myself as an observer rather than an analyst, you can pick up on these things, right? Yeah. But interestingly, when we were talking there about Leverkusen, and I absolutely love the story of Celtic's formation. It's cinematic, right? That you set up this football club because, the potato famine of the 1840s, 40 years later, and the Irish are still being mistreated in Glasgow, and various football clubs are formed to try and feed and support these people who are in poverty. And of course, Edinburgh did it with Hibernian. Manchester United did it. I think they were, what were they called? They weren't Manchester United back then. But see, when they changed their name, one of the options that they were going to change it to was Manchester Celtic. But they went for Manchester United, Dundee United, Dundee Hibernian, and of course Celtic. And I love the origins. I love that. And I remember a few years ago reading a brilliant article in one of the Irish newspapers where there was a very strong rumour that Peter Mullen had written a script to a movie called Paradise. And what it was the formation of Celtic, right? And he had already spoken to Daniel Day-Lewis about playing Brother Wilfred. Now, this was years ago, and the script's there, and it's never ever got off the ground. But I do think it's one of these fairy tale stories that could end up at some time on the silver screen. And it got me thinking when we were playing Bayer Leverkusen about the origins of their football club. Do you know what the origins of Bayer Leverkusen are, JP? I know that you travel about and you get to know cities and that kind of thing. Well, Bayer Leverkusen were one of these clubs that were formed out of a workplace. So they were a works team. So I remember being in the Netherlands when I used to play football back in my teenage years, and hearing the story about PSV Eindhoven, because you just think PSV, but it was the Philips work team that became SV Eindhoven and PSV. And it's similar with Bayer Leverkusen. So they were a pharmaceuticals company, right? And that was their logo. There, that's their logo, right? And you'll notice that Bayer Leverkusen logo has that in the centre as well, right? So you've got that there. But the pharmaceutical company were the first persons ever to trademark heroin. There it's there. You see it, the logo, Bayer. They were the very first pharmaceutical companies to trademark that. And that title, the name of said drug, which was used back in the day for bad toothache, apparently, was actually heroic, but it was changed to heroin. And that's
is that why they have the sort of, not motto, but there's a thing called like work self, like it's something to do with obviously work. It's not their motto, but I just seen like hashtag work self by Leverkusen, so it must have something to whoever's. I don't speak German, but whoever's persuasion will be able to explain what work self means.
That will be relating to the fact that it was a workers' team. But I found the origins of Bayer Leverkusen not as romantic as that of Celtic Football Club. And of course, the birthplace of Celtic is St Mary's. And just while we've been on this bulletin, the donations have been coming in. I've got to say thank you to every single person that's made a donation to the fundraiser. We're sitting at the moment at £1,535, JP, and we aim to make 10 grand over the weekend by basically putting out 24 hours of content. It's going to be on the YouTube channel. It's going to be on various other channels that we broadcast on, and we want to raise money for the birthplace of Celtic. So if you can donate, there is a link underneath this video. We've spoken about Tom Rogic and Near Beaton. Another couple of Celts that have been in the news this week are Cameron Carter-Vickers and Chris Jullien, the two centre-halves now. I mean, that's a year now, over a year, JP, since he collided with that post. And I remember having a discussion with you where you said that was one of the moments in the season that it looked as though we'd started getting a bit of form together. Then he collides with the post, and then we get the New Year's game coming around and Near Beaton gets sent off. It was like anything that could go wrong was going wrong. And we've never seen hide nor hair of him since, other than launching kits or being part of the Christmas advert. Are you concerned now? Because this apparently was a 9-month layoff, but it's been delayed to the point where when he's asked about it now, Ange doesn't seem to want to give too much information about it. I'm getting a bit concerned about Chris Jullien.
Yeah, I have to say I watched that. I watched that last night, the press conference, and I guess I'd read the comments first of all, and that reading the comments made me want to watch the press conference to see how he responded when he was asked. And it doesn't fill you with much confidence, does it? Because it doesn't sound like it's 100% right about the work stuff. It means of the workers, right?
See, generally, you could ask just about anything and you will get an answer
that's pretty cool.
on the comment section. Thank you, Brian.
I know the Jullien thing is a bit odd. I've heard from some people that that he will never play for Celtic again. Like I've heard people say that, and I don't know if it's just the sort of crazy rumors or whatever. But I mean, it does start to make you think, when is he going to be back? Because he's been posting stuff on his Instagram about the egg timer, and sort of the pump and iron emoji and stuff like that to suggest that he's very close. And it was intimated that he was going to be back after the international break, and we're now past the international break. No setbacks were detailed about his recovery. It was just a case of, he's working through things or something like that. It's like, whoa, it's kind of not like Ange Postecoglou to be as vague as that. He normally would give you more to go with than that, I think. So, well, I guess we'll wait and see. I mean, for God's sake, if he isn't going to be ready, we need to go out and sign a centre half in January. 100%. If we need another centre half, because everybody's been hanging their hat on, when Jullien comes back, and he's nowhere to be seen, and we're almost halfway through the season. Well, not quite, but we will be after the end of this month. So, it's a bit concerning because it's a part of the team that we really, really need, reinforcements there, because just like when Joe Hart went down on Sunday against Aberdeen, everybody was all on edge in the stadium. They were kind of thinking, "Oh God, this is going to mean Scott Bain." And no disrespect to Scott Bain, but he's not Joe Hart, as we've seen. And Joe Hart's been unbelievable. And the same thing, if Carter Vickers was to go down, it'd be the same thing. Everyone would be like, "Oh no, what does this mean? This means this means Near Beaton at centre half."
Yep.
No disrespect to Near Beaton, but he's not a centre half, as we've seen. It's just said the exact same thing. So I think it is a bit of concern.
It really is. And I think back to Simunovic. He was one of the centre halves, JP, that we could just never keep him fit. And obviously his issues were long-standing issues. He was a young man at Celtic, and basically his Celtic career ended because we couldn't get a tune out of him, because we knew, and it took him a long, long time to go back to his homeland and get a deal. So he didn't play for about 18 months after he left Celtic. And I just don't want the same thing to happen with Big Julian. I mean, he showed us as a defender, and also with his aerial prowess in the opposition's box, that he is a danger. And you and I, probably more than anyone else on the show, have spoken about that moment where he collides with the post. You hear the clunk because there's no fans in the stadium. And I just hope that he does fight back to full fitness. But it does take me on to the point of having to sign another centre half. Over the years, we've had some really decent loanees, in my opinion, coming in the centre half position. I thought Denier was an excellent talent, again, at a young age. A lot of people said, Van Dijk made him look good. I think Denier's went on and proved that he was a player in his own right. And the other one that I really liked, but similarly to Julian and Simunovic, it was a fitness issue with Filip Benkovic. We had him in on loan. But our most recent one, of course, is Cameron Carter-Vickers. And a few times on the podcast, we've spoken about the necessity to sign him because Jota's getting all the praise and because he's an entertaining footballer. But there was also this necessity that don't take your eye off Cameron Carter-Vickers. You've got to sign him up. And we were asking, what's the fee? And there was a fee up to, I heard things from 1.8 to 3 million quid. But during the week, we're talking about a vastly higher fee than that. If he is available, and you look at what he's done, and I think he has steadied the ship, and him and Hart have been a massive part of that at the back. And you think to yourself, well, we paid 4.5 for Starfelt. We paid 7 for Julian. I mean, what do we go to? What figure do we go to for Cameron Carter-Vickers, JP?
Well, I mean, we paid 7 for Julian. Then, I mean, Julian was older and isn't an international. So, I mean, people will balk at 10 million because it does seem a lot, and obviously it would break our transfer record by £1 million. If the 9 million for Edouard was what we actually paid, I've always believed that it was like 7 million plus add-ons to take it to 9. Whether or not we'll ever know that for sure, I don't know. But if it was a 10 million deal where it was something like 7, but would be made up to 10 based on appearances and all the rest of it, I mean, I don't really think that's that crazy a figure to be banding about, because the guy's what, 23. He is an international. Yes, he's not played week in, week out at a Premier League club down south. I mean, if we were to go after somebody that was a Premier League player that played week in, week out, a centre half, we wouldn't be paying 10 million quid for them. We'd be paying double, 3 times that,
Yep.
if we're, and we're never going to be spending that sort of money because we don't have it, and it doesn't seem feasible. So there's a sell on value to Cameron Carter-Vickers. If we pay, say, between 7 and 10 for him now, we get 2 seasons out of him. If he plays to a level, if we get to play at a higher level in Europe, and he plays as part of that, then his price rises. It fits the kind of the model that we've been successful with in the past. So I certainly, obviously it's not my money to play with. But maybe it kind of is, but I don't really know if you can count my season ticket as being anywhere close to touching the sides of 10 million quid. But you know, I wouldn't have an issue if that's what it was. And also, if the player wants to be here, that's the other thing. If both parties are up for this, and you've got a guy who's really keen to play for Celtic and sign for Celtic, and that's the money to make it work, then yeah, I would go for it.
It's one of these things. Again, I'm looking at the situation, and for me, you've got Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers. We're doing loan deals differently. We've been hearing, so we're trying to get, you know, a buy clause within the contract where we get the first option to buy Jota after the loan deal's ended. It's a very precarious situation to be in, though, because you've got Jota there who it all comes down to him whether or not he wants to sign the contract and come to Celtic. But he, in many ways, is using the platform in the meantime to show other people his worth. So there might come a point where, because of what he's doing at Celtic and because of the platform we've given him, he's able to secure what he might perceive as a bigger or better offer elsewhere. And I think that the other thing we've got to take account of, and I heard somebody asking the question, if you could get Jota for the buyout at £6.5 million that's been quoted, JP, and do a Jack Hendry on him, would you do it? Because obviously, you know, they basically just bounced them back out and doubled their money. Quite frankly, no, I wouldn't, because it's taken us so long to get someone of that talent that I want to see him kicking about. And I say this a lot when I'm talking about Celtic. We've named a few players there who, you know, if you go back to the Barcelona game at Celtic Park, right, and you look at the players we've had since then, and you know, let's say we didn't have that 3-year turnaround plan where we buy a player in, we sell him at a profit, we move on to the next one, and we were able to build a side instead. You've got a side there that could do a hell of a lot better in Europe than we ever have done in the last decade. You know, and I know football doesn't always work like that, but the players we're talking about are all still of a level. You know, from Foster through Denier and Van Dijk to Wanyama and Dembele and Edouard and so on and so forth. You throw in Kyogo and Jota in there as well, and you've got Tierney at left back. You've got McKenzie, not a bad team. And you ask yourself, what on earth could we have done if they all played together? And that, again, comes right to the structure of the club and how we buy and sell players. But I think with Carter-Vickers, if we don't buy him, JP, then we've got a huge headache because we need to replace him and potentially Julian. You know,
I agree. I think as much as everyone's been frugal about money, I mean, we've chucked money. We've got two players sitting there that aren't really contributing who've cost us a combined 10 million, and you know that can't be forgotten. I mean, I don't forget it. It's something I think about all the time. Every time I hear the name Barkas, I just immediately think of £5 million. Every time I hear the name Ayeti, I think of £5 million. I don't think of the contributions that they've made because they've been minimal. And we might never know the reasons why they haven't done as well as they clearly should have done. I mean, you alluded to it recently, you know, where we're signing a Greek international goalkeeper. This wasn't like Raphael Scheidt with like where he'd been given a cap by some shady boss. Like this is, you know, he was a genuine international, you know, had played with AEK Athens in the Champions League. There was no real concerns on our part as to his prowess as a football player. And Ayeti as well, you're like, okay, there was doubts over him because of his season at West Ham. Obviously, you're thinking, is he going to be another one of these guys that comes up here and turns it round and, you know, sort of gives two fingers to the critics down south and sort of goes, oh, this is what I can actually do. And everybody was kind of thinking that would happen. It was just unfortunate for him that he arrived at the start of a season that was, you know, the wheels were coming off it before it even really got going. You know, by the end of August, there was the chat of players not wanting to be here, and Albion Ayeti was caught up in the middle of that. And so was Barkas. So, but yeah, I don't know. It
goes back to a point you've already made, though. You know, had Albion Ayeti been a success at West Ham, he'd been nowhere near Celtic Park. Had Joe Hart been playing well for Spurs, we would never have been able to attain his services. No. So, you know, it's a market that you know, the margins are very, very fine.
Yeah.
And I always look back on that Raphael story because John Colquhoun was involved in that deal. And John Colquhoun was the very first guest we had in a State of Mind studio before we even started live streaming. And we had a wee chat about the Raphael deal. And Celtic went out and watched them a number of times in Brazil. And his teammate that probably should have stood out was Ronaldinho at Grêmio. And when Ronaldinho actually got his move from Grêmio, it was for less than what we paid for Raphael. So, you know, it just shows you in terms of bad business. We have done it over the years. But like you say, when it comes to the centre-half position, it shows you how difficult we found it to get a decent centre-half. We've found one. We know what he can do. Right, so maybe we're going to be paying 3 times more than we thought we were going to. But we know what we're getting. It's a lesser risk when we bring in somebody like Carter Vickers, who's already played, by which time it'll be a season at Celtic Park. And Strangelove the Doctor reminds us of big Ramon Vega as well, who I think scored 2 on his debut against Aberdeen at Celtic Park, if I remember correctly.
He was from Spurs, wasn't he?
He was from Spurs as well, aye. And big Ramon was on a Celtic State of Mind earlier on in the season, talking about how he wants to get back into football, but he wants to go in at the CEO level. And at that point, we had a CEO. And now we don't. Brilliant. But that became a story after the event. I'm just going to remind everybody that we are doing our big charity weekender this weekend. St Mary's need the cash. It's as simple as that, JP. And we will have more information as the weekend goes on, but they need the cash. And I think that at this kind of juncture, I took it for granted that there was various things set up, you know, in terms of maybe funds that Celtic or the support had been involved in. I was quite surprised that that's not the case. So we're going to take it into our hands and we're going to try and raise as much as we possibly can. And at this moment in time, we're sitting at £1,540. Thanks everybody who has been donating during the show, JP. And we are a wee well to go, but I think we can reach the target of £10,000. We reached 27 grand last year. And this time round, 24 hours of content. So lots to look forward to.
You mentioned that Sunday might not go ahead. You said if the game goes ahead, why would that be in doubt?
There was stories, I was reading this morning, stories around about a safety issue at Tannadice because of the high winds. So I'm keeping a close eye on that as well, just to make sure that you'll remember, we've mentioned Raphael Scheidt, purchased by or under the tenure of John Barnes. The Inverness Cali game, you'll remember, was actually delayed because there was some guttering that was hanging off the stand. And
I was in the bus park that day. I remember it well. It was horrible. We all just about turned and went back to Edinburgh, and then the game happened. A week later or something? It was after I'd moved to France for uni, so I found out the score over the phone, on the phone of my dad. It's just a bizarre scenario of being told over the phone by my dad that we'd been beaten 3-1 off Inverness Cali. It was just like a completely surreal experience. I thought it was in the wind-up. I really did. I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was an actual real thing that had happened, but unfortunately, it was. And
it was, and
never let us forget that either.
The thing with that game, though, is obviously it was a death knell of John Barnes's managerial career at Celtic. There was no coming back from that. But he did tell us the story that he went in the following day, had a meeting with the board, and it was fine. He wasn't getting the sack. Sky Sports then came on, and they were interviewing various people outside Celtic Park. He was called back in, sacked. Interesting enough. So it was obviously most that it had to happen. But it's one of the games that you try and erase from your memory, JP. Can you remember who scored for Celtic that night?
Well, no, I didn't get to see the game. I've never seen that whole game. I think I've seen Inverness celebrating at the end. I've got a feeling it was Burchill.
It was Burchill.
Yeah.
And he actually equalised. And then Moravcik scored an own goal before half-time, and they were beating us 2-1 at half-time, and Big Viduka takes his boots off and everything else started kicking off. So, interesting times. big charity weekender this weekend. Really looking forward to that. Thanks everybody for your donations. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments section. It's tremendous to get the chat going wherever you're watching. But if you are watching on YouTube, get subscribing and click on the notifications bell, because we are producing content every single day. I always enjoy it on a Thursday. Thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers.